Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM, Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. It's a Medical Monday, and we are talking about a health crisis hiding in plain sight. Heart disease is the number one killer of women in America, and Black women have been and remain at even greater risk. Obviously, there are high blood pressure issues, diabetes, stress, and of course, lack of access to care. The warning signs are often missed or misunderstood. February is Heart Month, and tonight we're breaking down the risk factors and the latest treatments and what Black women need to know to protect their hearts and lives. My guests are Dr. Yolanda Lewis Ragland, founder and CEO of Dr. Yolanda Cares Foundation Incorporated. She is also a double board certified pediatrician and a wellness expert. We also have Dr. Paul Underwood, cardiologist and chair of the Association of Black Cardiologists and vice president of the Open My Heart Foundation. And of course, Florence Champagne. Dr. Champagne is chair and CEO of the Open My Heart Foundation. Florence had a heart attack in 2012. She's been on the program before, and as always, after welcoming you all, I always want to know, Florence, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling fine today. Thank you for asking.
Good today.
Oh, yeah, some days I have my days.
Uh
We are
huh.
still patients.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to ask you about that because I think some people think that once they have recovered from a heart attack that it's all done. You still have to obviously take care of yourself, and we will get into that in a bit. But I did want to share just a couple of fast facts. As I mentioned, cardiovascular disease, the number one killer for all women, Black women experiencing the highest burden with more than 50,000 Black women dying every year. Some 59% of Black women ages 20 and over are living with some form of cardiovascular disease. Black women have the highest prevalence of high blood pressure. Only 25% of Black women have their high blood pressure under control, and almost 57% of Black women are obese, the highest percentage among all racial, ethnic, and gender groups. I want to talk a little bit about this issue. Heart disease, of course, the leading cause of death for women. Why are Black women at even greater risk? If I can, have Dr. Underwood share your thoughts with me about that.
Well, certainly, and thank you for having us on your program, Harold. It's
Sure.
been a pleasure working with you over time and certainly getting the message out to people, particularly on this February Heart Month and Black History Month. But to your point, why are women at higher risk? It's likely because the higher preponderance of risk factors that they are impacted by. So, when we look at the risk factors for cardiovascular disease, which are high blood pressure, diabetes, having a family history of high cholesterols, and then also the stresses that are about our lives in general, which raise the cortisol levels. All those may weigh heavily on women, and as a result, you'll have a higher preponderance of cardiovascular disease.
Hmm. When you think about all of these issues and your particular situation, Dr. Champagne, what comes to mind?
Well, what comes to my mind is that I knew nothing about any signs or symptoms of heart disease. So having a heart attack was the furthest thing from my mind. Even though it was in my family history, I still did not connect the dots or correlate it with anything being wrong with my heart as I was experiencing the shortness of breath. That's what comes to my mind as far as women. I think that we are the caregivers of the world. We take care of others, but we really don't take care of ourselves, or we put that on the back burner, thinking I can do this, I can get through this. It must be something else, and we kind of shrug things off.
Dr. Yolanda, you are a pediatrician. Uh, you're not a cardiac specialist. Why, in your line of work, would this be a focus of yours? Aside from the fact that you're a Black woman, I'm not going to give you that one.
I was gonna say, it's all right. It's okay.
Okay, that's that's a slam dunk right there.
Right. I so sort of piggybacking on what Dr. Champagne said, right? As caregivers, we often don't know the signs and symptoms and of heart disease and actually lots of other chronic illnesses. And what I recognize as a pediatrician, so I'm a pediatrician, but I was also doing child and adolescent obesity. So that correlation between obesity and heart disease is very large. And what I started to experience was that I was treating children, young people, teens for hypertension, for diabetes, for all these things that were predisposing them to heart disease. One of the statistics that blew me away was that 49% of African American women have heart disease by age 20, which means prior to 20, there's heart disease that is growing in sort of manifesting, but without the symptoms, right? So hypertension, for instance, they say is one of the deadliest. It's a deadly killer because a lot of people don't get symptoms before it's actually they find out they have it. So a lot of pediatricians don't recognize that their patients are predisposed or at danger. And so I was finding that kids had early kidney disease because of hypertension, because no one was paying attention to their numbers going up. And it ends up with long-term the result of kidney damage if you have hypertension that is unchecked. So I think it's extremely important that we begin to talk about heart disease prior to, I was talking about this. One of the earliest things that people go to is the red dress, event, but they're in their 40s and 50s learning about heart disease. And it's not that it's too late, but had we been talking about this, because the things that we need to do is talk about nutrition. Had we been talking about nutrition from the time they were children and teens, we would actually be affecting not only obesity, but hypertension, high cholesterol. Had we been talking about exercise for children and teens, we would be preventing this. So this is highly preventable, but we have to talk about it much earlier than when we're talking about it, which is when we have symptoms.
Okay, let me drill down a little bit more about that, because I was really struck by what you were saying, that Black women by the age of 20 have some form of heart disease. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I remember what it was like to be 20 years old, and my peer groups, the young women, and something like that just would not have even occurred to me. So what you're saying, Dr. Yolanda, is that in the those years leading up to 20, that children are not eating right, they're not exercising, they're not doing all of the things that one would hope that parents would make sure that they should do.
Right. We've taken physical ed out of schools, right? So we've taken PE out of schools and we put vending machines in schools. And so these two things alone, with the explosion of fast food restaurants, there was a time when there was a McDonald's on the corner and you could go miles before you saw another McDonald's, right? Going down the street. And it's not just McDonald's, it's all these fast food restaurants, but it's the convenience foods that we have thrown into, and processed foods that we've thrown, even Lunchables, by God, the things that they're actually marketing to not just the children, but they're marketing to parents because it's convenient for the parents, right? If you're a busy parent, feed your kid this. These are not foods. These are lots of processed we call them food, but they're not they're not actually categorized as food, right? So we're feeding our children poorly, and we've taken physical ed out of schools. And then our parents are so busy that they can't put them a lot of times in different programs or sports because they're so busy. So we're setting our children up for heart disease, for obesity, for, again, kidney damage, all of the things that come with this. And because if we don't get this message out early, then we're behind the 8 ball. And then you're wondering why. On top of that, the stress that we're saying, the women are the ones taking care of these families and getting themselves in a position where they're taking care of everyone else and not themselves. There is no question as to why it's affecting Black women more than it's affecting anyone else.
Dr. Underwood, I'm just going to ask an uncomfortable question. Based on what Dr. Yolanda is suggesting, Black families aren't doing something, whether it's their fault or the fault of the difficulties of life and their circumstances. What's wrong with us? Why can't we get this message? It's 2026. We've been talking about this for a really long time.
I think it's likely a matter of prioritization. And just as Dr. Yolanda said, people don't have symptoms. And if they don't have symptoms, then it typically doesn't rise to the level of them actually taking any action for it. What's happened over a period of time is that we don't have to necessarily wait for you to feel bad or to have a heart attack before we know that there's something going on. And it's possible that we could discover this earlier if you went in and got checked. And that's what we want people to do, is to go in and get checked and then understand what their risk is, because the way that we manage it now, as you said, in 2026, is different than the way that we managed it in 2016 and 2000 and years before. And so there's much more available now, and not taking part in that makes it such that we will die faster because we're not taking part in what's actually out there to benefit us. And so others take part in that. But if we don't access the healthcare system, and that's what you said earlier in terms of access, if we don't access the healthcare system in a way that's going to get us those things, particularly for therapies. But I think I know Dr. Yolanda is right on point, because a lot of these things are things that we take in our mouths and things that we don't do with our bodies. Right? And the convenience of being here in America makes that, but that is really driving this obesity epidemic, which is why the cardiovascular rates don't continue to fall.
Speaking of participating, both Dr. Yolanda and Dr. Florence have some events that you wanted to share with our listeners. Before we go into the break, Dr. Yolanda, I'll start with you. What's the event, and where can people find information about it?
So every year I do something called the Red Dress Affair, or the Red Carpet Affair, sorry. I'm also thinking about Red Dress Day coming up, but the Red Carpet Affair, and it's on February 21st. I always do the third weekend, President's Day weekend. And it's February 21st. It takes place at the Black Box Theater at the Arc in Southeast DC. It's a population that I'm very endeared to, just because there is, a lot of issues with chronic disease and decreased access to care, and just trying to get that information and those resources out. Tickets are free. This is free education, free food, free entertainment. And you can get the tickets right on Eventbrite. And again, the reason I do this is because I use children and youth in the education and entertainment. I'm making sure that we are talking about this among children and among teens. And your captive audience, when you have the entertainers as children and teens, are parents. So the parents come out, and that's why we do it.
Okay, and Dr. Champagne, your event, when is it, and what is it, and how can people get more information real quick?
Sure. So we have a 2-day event every year. We're coming up on our 11th year celebration and anniversary. The first event is taking place on February 27th, and that's with a Heart Health Symposium in partnership with the University of Maryland, Capital Region Medical Center. It's a free event. And we're going to be addressing heart health initiatives and closing the gap with new laws. We are very proud to have been the champion to push for cardiac screenings. I've often said if cardiovascular or heart disease is the leading cause of death, why aren't we being screened for it?
So
Annually.
I've got to stop you because I'm low on time.
Okay.
Where is it, and how can people find out information about the
Sure.
2-day event?
So they can go to the openmyheartfoundation.org. The second day is February 28th, and that's with our all red jazz brunch, where we're honoring heart and stroke survivors. And we're very proud to have the Silver Fox Squad members, a few, come and help us out with that.
Oh yeah, I'm sure the ladies will be focused on their heart palpitations when those guys walk in the room. Listen, yes, indeed. Listen, thank you for that. We're going to take a quick break, but don't forget you can hear this in every edition of the Daily Drum Inside segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR-FM. We'll be back on Sirius XM, channel 141 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our Medical Monday conversation about heart health during Heart Month. My guests are Dr. Yolanda Lewis-Ragland, founder and CEO of the Dr. Yolanda Cares Foundation, Dr. Paul Underwood, cardiologist and chair of the Association of Black Cardiologists and vice chair of the Open My Heart Foundation, and Dr. Florence Champagne, chair and CEO of the Open My Heart Foundation. I want to go back to something I was saying in the beginning, because I'm always really fascinated by your particular circumstances, Dr. Champagne, where I asked how you were doing, and you said you're doing okay today. For those who are unfamiliar with what that means, because now we are talking about 14 years. Is it right? 14 years since your heart attack? Do I have my math right? Yeah. So why today instead of every day?
Well, as you know, it's a disease that it's something that you're living with. We have to watch our stress levels. We have to watch our diet and our exercise levels. And so sometimes with medication and different therapies, that is treated. And so sometimes, though, it gets a little bit out of whack. So we have to constantly be monitored and under the doctor's care. So sometimes my pressure may rise a little. And then sometimes I may be under certain stressors, so I have to take it easy and things like that. So it fluctuates, in other words. So I tell all of my heart survivors, take care of yourself. Try to eliminate the stresses in your life, as well as I have to take heed to my own advice as well. I'm also a social worker and a caregiver for my 93-year-old mom. So as I take care of her, I have to learn to take care of myself as well.
So with all of that said, how are you taking care of yourself?
Well, I try to pace myself. I try to get that exercise in at least a couple of days a week to get the heart pumping and things like that. And with diet, eating right, especially through not eating like fried foods, cutting back on the amount of animal fat, and making sure that we're nourished and drinking plenty of fluids and things like that. So constantly preaching to myself as well as others about diet and exercise, as well as cutting back on the stress and pacing yourself, managing to, do the things you need to do, but, maybe some things you can't do or scale it back. so that you're not overwhelmed. When I first started out with an organization as a spokesperson, I was going everywhere, all over the place. My pressure was rising, and I had to scale back. So that is a constant thing that we must monitor and take heed to.
Mm. When you think about, Dr. Yolanda, the importance of Black women taking care of themselves, I often wonder. It's one thing to preach it, but, or as they say, talk the talk, but walking the walk is a completely different thing, even when you may be at risk of a life-ending incident.
Mhm.
So why is it, again, this goes back to, if the information is out there now, hey, hands waving in the air, you're listening to this conversation. If you're a Black woman, or you know a Black woman, or you live with a Black woman, or you were raised by a Black woman, or if you have a Black girl who's going to eventually be a Black woman, you know, uh, red alert. I don't think the color is too far from why we need to be paying attention to these things.
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked this question to me because quite frankly, I'm 55 years old, and I am reminded every day of sort of my mortality, if you will. So my mother died young. She died. She had a brain aneurysm. It was related to medication. She died at 57. When I was 28, 57 seemed so old at that moment when my mother passed. At 55, it's so young, right? And about 10 years ago, I'm listening to Florence, to Dr. Florence, and I remember 10 years ago being very overworked. I'm working in Ward 8, Southeast DC. I was just doing all the things, advocating for my patients, single mom of 3. They were in every activity because I knew that they needed to be exercising. I knew all about how they needed to eat. I was doing all this stuff for them. And some epiphany I had was, first of all, I'm not teaching them how to care for themselves because I'm caring for them better than I'm caring for me. So in order to teach my children how to put themselves first, and that's not selfish, that's something that we need to learn as self-preservation, I began to put myself first. I went part-time. I started looking for ways that I could actually regain the autonomy that I needed to be able to sort of do what I needed to do for me and for my children and still make a decent living. And I did it. And now 10 years later, meditation is a part of my lifestyle every day. The way that we eat is very, I just changed so many things. And I wasn't having a crisis. The point is, to Dr. Underwood's point earlier, so many people will make these changes after they have a crisis. And it was just a revelation that I don't need to wait until I'm going to have a crisis to make these changes. So it's hard to do without symptoms, but we have to start learning that we don't need symptoms to make changes, that we just need information. We just need to understand and access. I think by having communities where we're recognizing self-care is so necessary to do it proactively, we need to begin to build that within our community so that we're not waiting for people to have a problem before we respond to it. Prevention is the key. I don't want us only reacting to problems. I want us to prevent these problems, which is why as a pediatrician, I'm doing all that I can, because we have to begin to do prevention. And our healthcare system is not a preventative healthcare system. It's a reactionary healthcare system, unfortunately. So it's a responsibility of folks that look like us, Dr. Underwood, myself, and others, to start talking about what prevention should be, because too often our community reacts instead of be proactive.
Dr. Underwood, is this issue regarding heart health and heart disease problematic for all people to deal with, because unlike a a breast cancer, or unlike some other kind of of disease, or even like a broken arm, that people can't see it, and they may not even feel it until they really feel it, and they end up in an ambulance or something like that.
That's absolutely true. So ending up in an ambulance is a crisis situation that Yolanda just spoke of. So we can prevent that. We can prevent strokes. We can prevent people having heart attacks and falling over. We can prevent people from having heart failure, but it has to be done in advance. You can't have the event and then expect to have the same result that you would have had before. And I think that one key thing, particularly that Dr. Champagne said, is that she was watching, she's monitoring these things. So she's doing things herself personally in terms of diet and exercise, but she's keeping a handle on her blood pressure. She's making sure that her cholesterol is good. She's always monitoring to make sure that her blood sugars, is always within the normal range, right? So there's certain things that you can do, but you have to check, because you can't wait for your blood pressure to hurt you. You can't wait for your cholesterol to hurt you, because that is a crisis situation. So what you need to do is to get screened, and that's a large part of the problem, is people don't understand what their risk is, because everything feels good. They don't get it checked. It's just like not checking the oil in your car. You just keep driving it because it drives, and you just don't pay attention to it until it starts, to the light comes on, the check engine light comes on. That's not the way to do your body, particularly living in this environment where we have a lot of salt. We have a lot of ultra processed foods. We're very efficient. We don't have to exercise very much anymore. So there are a lot of changes that have happened to us that we need to be aware of. And one key thing is knowing your numbers, and then understanding what your risk is, and to treat your risk appropriately.
What goes into a heart health screening? If I go into a doctor's office, what does that entail, number one? And number two, is that screening different for women when compared to men?
So screening is really just looking at someone to see if there's something amiss. So the first thing, the easiest thing for us to do is check your blood pressure, right? So honestly, people should be doing that at home anyway. That's the reason for selling those little blood pressure machines in the drugstores, is so that people should take care of this themselves. But that is one of the first regulators that you can do. Another one that you would typically get is certainly an electrocardiogram, right? And if there's anything abnormal with that, then it would be followed up on. Their blood tests, certainly looking at your blood cholesterol is very important. Looking at your kidney function is very important. So we would expect that pretty much as a minimum if someone was kind of looking at your heart. The differences between men and women depend on what direction you're going into. There are a myriad of heart tests. And once you've been alerted that there's an issue, then it's time to explore those more. I think that we need to understand women and heart disease better, because there are certain forms of heart disease that really they pretty much impact women only. And so we should understand those well. But then the form of heart disease that is killing most people is atherosclerosis. So cholesterol buildup in the arteries and plugging off the blood vessels, either going to your brain or to your heart, and then having problems resulting from that.
So, Dr. Champagne, when you look back over the past 14 years or so, do you feel better now? I don't mean today, but I mean at this stage in your life than you did 14 years ago or even 10 years ago?
Well, I would say I feel as though I'm more educated now. I could have been going through some things like with stress, for example, and as a social worker, handling every patient in the building, the level of stress that I was under, I was used to functioning at that level. But now I know to cut back on the amount of stress that I was under. So I might have been under, but may not have paid attention to the amount of stress and what it was doing to my body. I have to say, I don't believe I was that much in tune to my body. But looking back, I do know the signs and symptoms were there. And I also want to add that if I would have had something as simple as a calcium score test, it could have told me early on that there were warning signs. And so now that it's law with the calcium score testing in the state of Maryland, we can have something simple as a calcium score test as an early detection for if there's any signs of heart disease. And
I guess what I'm asking, this is a really foundational question. So before you had your heart attack, did you exercise?
I did off and on, but not as much as I do now. Now I'm more intentional about it.
And this is why I asked that question. When you exercised before you had the heart attack off and on, was that a difficult thing to do? In other words, when you were exercising, was it something that that you enjoyed? Was it hard? Was it compared to now when you say you try to do it twice a week? Does it require more effort now? Did it require more effort then? I'm trying to get a picture of, now that you know what you didn't know before, now that you're taking care of yourself like you weren't taking care of yourself post heart attack. That's why I was like, how do you?
Yeah, I guess I would say now it's more intentional. Before, working all the time, I would not find the time to exercise as I should have. But now, so now I do it more often and I put more effort into it.
Mm-hmm. And when you're done, sweating out your hair and everything else, do you feel okay, or do you feel ugh?
No, I feel okay. I feel much better.
I think that's important for people to hear, because I think if women and men, but like you said, you did it off and on before you had the heart attack 14 years ago, and maybe I'll do it this week, and maybe I'll do it this month, or maybe I'll do it this weekend if I don't have anything else to do. But now you're doing it twice a week, and that you are able to do it twice a week with consistency, maybe 3 times a week, or maybe you get it in once a week, but at least being purposeful in that. And I think that goes to the heart of having more information. Now, here's another question. And this is actually for Dr. Yolanda. Did you do any shoveling this week?
Did I do shoveling?
Yes.
I did not personally shovel. I had shoveling done.
Yeah, you had, because, okay.
Now I have shoveled in the past. Don't get me wrong.
So, because I've seen some on social media over the past couple of weeks, whether I've seen a lot of sisters out there shoveling.
Yeah.
And, but all jokes aside, even today, DC Mayor Muriel Bowser mentioned some concerns about, heart attacks, for everyone, not just women, but for men as well, getting out there. And so this is what I wanted to ask you, when you see these kinds of things, Dr. Underwood, I'm sure you've seen or have heard there, Black women out there shoveling their own snowcrete. With all of this information that we're talking about right now, are you concerned about some of those women may have an emergency while out there trying to clear their driveway or their sidewalk?
Okay, so I think that's a fantastic question. I don't see it as a way of avoiding shoveling because you risk of having a problem. But
hey, one of those kids running around with the shovel, do they do that anymore?
But the whole story is that oftentimes heart disease shows up when you're exerting yourself. And usually shoveling is when you exert yourself. And if you have symptoms at that time, that means that you should get checked out. So a lot of times with heart disease, people will understand when they start feeling bad, and so they'll stop doing it. So someone may be exercising a lot, but then if it starts to bother them to exercise, they'll just do less and less and less. And so that's the way that you can avoid having symptoms. And that's why things often can wait and be delayed for a long period of time before a crisis develops and you can't do nothing anymore, right? So so you should know what the symptoms of heart disease are. And if you're out there shoveling snow and it comes on, that's a key indication you should get checked out. That's just like your own little stress test right there. I mean, you should hold up your hand and go to your doctor, because a lot of people don't exert themselves to that degree unless they're forced to with, a bunch of snow that fell and you have to shovel it. You're not just going to go out and start shoveling just to see if you can do it or not.
Right. So as it relates to what you were just sharing with us, let's talk about women. If they decide that they want to get out there and shovel, okay. But if they are feeling symptoms, what might they feel or experience differently from a man?
Okay, so most of the symptoms are the same as it goes with. So the symptoms would be a tightening in the chest that seems to make it hard to breathe. Sometimes it goes up to the left jaw or the left shoulder down the arm. So that type of discomfort. It could be shortness of breath, where you think that I shouldn't really be this short of breath by doing this amount of work. It could be that. It could be fluttering in the chest, particularly fluttering that makes you feel dizzy. What women seem to be more apt to have is stomach type symptoms, that it seems to be coming from the stomach, or like a bad feeling, like you break out in a sweat. Women tend to have more of that, but it's the exertional characteristic. I was out there shoveling and this feeling came on me that made me want to stop. And then I stopped for a little while and I was able to start back up until it came back again. And then that made me stop and put it down. So that is heart disease. And if it hits you and it doesn't stop, that's a crisis situation.
Mm-hmm. How would you recommend, Dr. Champagne, that women advocate for themselves with their physicians, whether they have physicians who look like them or whether they do not? Because I ask this, and I've had these conversations with some sister friends about issues that have nothing to do with the heart, but certainly their health. And I say, well, if you don't agree with this or you want a second opinion, you need to go ahead and get a second opinion, blah, blah, blah. What I have heard from them is that it is not as easily done than it is, said.
Right.
It requires time. It requires research to find someone to get you that second opinion. You may have to take more time off to do that. All of these things certainly
Amen.
necessary. You got to do it. But it's not an easy thing to do.
Well, I would say right now, it's easier than ever to do a little bit of research online to see what something could be or the definition of it. For example, when you're talking to your doctor, I would say, could this be heart related, or is there another test that you could give me to find out if it's heart related? If it runs in your family, you can just be more in tune and aware. Even though it ran in my family, I still did not connect the dots. And Dr. Yolanda talked about this a little earlier, where we just don't do anything until something happens to us. So it wasn't until something happened that I then backtracked and became a little bit more aware of what was happening to me or why it might have happened. But I would say do a little bit of research online, find out what something may be. Not that you're diagnosing yourself, but now you may be a little bit more armed to know what to ask the doctor to look for. So, just having a little bit more of knowledge and knowing that there's tests out there. And let me just also say that sometimes we as women, or, just depending on your personality, you may feel as though the doctor is right. I should not question them. So you walk away not really investigating anything. And that is what happened to me several times, even though I was experiencing the shortness of breath and I was told it may be stress or anxiety. And then I would leave not knowing that I did have this buildup in my arteries. So I had to be a little bit more persistent, but it wasn't me that was being persistent. I just took the doctor's word that it was nothing serious going on with me. But now I know, as an advocate, we do have to push a little bit more to see if it could be something else.
Let me ask you, Dr. Underwood, in these last few minutes, are there any new treatments for heart disease that perhaps we didn't see 5 years ago or even a year or two ago that people need to know about?
Well, sure. There have been advances, and definitely there are new treatments. But I do think the most important thing is to make sure that you have the diagnosis, so high blood pressure, whether you have diabetes, if you need to have the obesity treated, if you have high cholesterol, that you know what the numbers are. And then there are new medications, new forms of therapy, some of them interventional therapies that can reduce your risk. But it's most important, I think, for prevention. If you have risk factors, there's now a test, this coronary calcium score that Dr. Champagne just mentioned. That's a test for people who have risk factors, and they can let you know whether you have blockages in your heart or not. It's available for people now to have access to, particularly those in Maryland. Certainly it's available in all states, and most of the time insurance covered is. But in Maryland, the governor has mandated that all the insurance companies pay for this test if you fit into that category. And so we want to make sure that people know about that, because if they do have risk factors, enough risk factors that put them at risk for having heart disease, you can actually go get it checked now. And that's going to help to guide how you lead your life afterwards.
I am out of time, but I wanted to thank all of you for sharing with me again this year, and ringing the bell, flashing the red light, not just for Black women, but for Black people and their health. It is so very, very important. And ladies, congratulations and good luck on your events that are coming up this month. I really appreciate it. And of course, Dr. Yolanda, you don't need to be out there shoveling snow. So, and Dr. Champagne, keep exercising.
Absolutely.
Thank you all so much. Take care.
Thank you.
That is the Daily Drum for this Monday, February 2nd. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.